In the heart of their own village, a small farming community surrounded by endless stretches of cocoa farms and yam fields, life moved at a gentle pace. The early morning sun bathed the landscape in golden hues, the scent of fresh air, the scent of fresh dew hanging in the air as birds chirped melodiously from the trees. It was a world where simplicity reigned, and the rhythmic patterns of the seasons guided life at the villages. This was the world young Adeoti knew and loved, a world filled with warmth, family, and routine. Adeoti was a bright and energetic boy of just 8, with a mischievous smile that could light up the room and eyes full of wonder for the world around him. His days were filled with a kind of innocent joy that only childhood could bring. He spent his mornings helping his father, Ade, tend to their small but prosperous cocoa farm, running among the trees and learning the secrets of farming passed down through the generations. In the afternoons after school, he would play with his friends in the village square, their laughter echoing through the open air. Adeoti's father, was a man of great stature and reputation in the village. He was hardworking, a respected cocoa farmer who never hesitated to help others. His hands, calloused from years of toiling in the fields, were a testament to his dedication to his family. Ade's wife, Ajoke, was equally admired, a woman of gentle spirit. She was known for her kindness and her business acumen, selling sandals and children's clothing at the village market. Her trips to the bustling city to restock her goods always brought back stories and treasures that fascinated Adeoti. Together, Ade and Ajoke created a home filled with love, warmth, and a sense of security. In the evenings, the family would gather for dinner, sitting around a small table as the comforting smells of roasted yam and spicy fish stew filled the air. Adeoti loved these moments, listening to his parents' stories while they laughed and shared their hopes for the future. His mother would often speak of sending him to school in the city, where he could get an education that would allow him to achieve great things. He would dream about the city life, tall buildings, wide roads, and schools with playgrounds as large as the village square. Bade, Ade's younger brother, added to these dreams. Bade, who lived in the city with his wife, Agony, and their children, John and Jane, visited occasionally, always bringing an air of excitement with him. He would arrive in his old car, their children running out to greet him as soon as they heard the familiar rumbles of his engine. Adeoti adored his uncle, who seemed larger than life with his tales of the city, of endless streets lined with shops, markets bustling with people, and opportunities that seemed boundless. Bade had promised many times that one day he would take Adeoti to the city, a promise that filled Adeoti's night with endless dreams. But life, as it often does, took a tragic turn. One sunny morning, Ajoke kissed Adeoti on the forehead, a warm smile as bright as ever, as she prepared for another trip to the city to buy goods for the market. She waved goodbye to Ade and Adeoti, telling them she would return soon with treats from the city. Adeoti watched a car disappear down the dusty road, not knowing that this would be the last time he would see his mother alive. The afternoon brought a sudden change in weather. Dark clouds rolled in, and by evening, a heavy rain had begun to fall. The downpour seemed ominous, as if nature itself was mourning before the tragedy even struck. A neighbor arrived at their door, drenched and trembling. Her face was pale, her voice barely a whisper as she delivered the terrible news. Ajoke's car had collided with a truck on the highway. There were no survivors. Adeoti's world came crashing down. In one day, everything he knew, everything that had brought him joy, was torn away. He clung to his father, sobbing uncontrollably as Ade held him. Though his own heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces, Ade tried to be strong for his son, but grief overwhelmed him. The once robust man who commanded respect in the village began to wither under the weight of his sorrow. His health, already delicate from years of hard work, began to deteriorate rapidly. The light in Ade's eyes dimmed, leaving him behind the shadow of the man he once was. The village, once filled with laughter and life, became a place of despair for Adeoti. The villagers who had once admired Ade now whispered among themselves, casting pitying glances toward the boy as they walked past the empty fields. As Ade's health continued to decline, the farm became neglected. The once beautiful cocoa trees began to wither, their fruits stolen by opportunistic villagers who saw an easy chance to take what wasn't theirs. Adeoti, now only 8, had to grow up faster than any child should. He took on the responsibility of the household, waking early to care for the farm, though his small hands struggled with the tasks. After school, he would try to sell what little produce they had left at the market, standing beside the very spot his mother once sold her goods. His nights were spent beside his father's sick bed, watching over him with a kind of care and patience that no child should ever have to give. As time passed, the inevitable happened. One fateful morning, Adeoti woke to find his father had passed away quietly in the night, his body finally giving in to the weight of his grief and illness. The loss of his mother had been unbearable, but losing his father as well broke something deep inside of Adeoti. He was now completely alone in the world that had once been filled with warmth and love. The funeral was small and somber. Only a few villagers attended, offering their condolences with hollow words. Adeoti stood by his father's grave, staring at the freshly turned earth, his face expressionless, as the last of his family was laid to rest. The sun was setting behind the trees, casting long shadows across the graveyard. In that moment, the world felt too big, too empty for a boy who had lost everything. For days after the burial, Ade wandered aimlessly around the village. He no longer played with his friends, no longer attended school. He simply existed. His heart too heavy for joy, his spirit too burdened for hope. He would sit for hours by the cocoa trees, staring at the dried up crops that had once been his father's pride. It was during this time of despair that Bade Adeoti's uncle returned to the village. He had not been present for the funeral. His work in the city had kept him away. But when he heard of Ade's death, he rushed to Iran to fulfill the promise he had made so long ago. Bade arrived in the village just as dusk was falling. The familiar rumble of his car reaching Adeoti's ears. But this time, there was no running out to greet him, nor excitement in the air. Bade found Adeoti sitting alone by the remains of the farm. His small body hunched over, his eyes dull. He knelt down beside his nephew, placing a gentle hand over his shoulder. Adeoti, Bade said softly, his voice filled with regret and sorrow. I am sorry I wasn't here, but I've come now to take you to the city, just like I've promised. For a moment, Adeoti didn't respond. He had heard too many promises lately, and none of them had held true. But something in Bade's eyes Something genuine, something filled with love, gave him the strength to believe again. Bade gathered Adeoti's few belongings, and together they left the village. As they drove away from the only home Adeoti had ever known, the fields and trees disappearing into distance, Adeoti looked back one last time. The pain of the loss was still fresh. But for the first time since his mother's death, a glimmer of hope sparked within him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he wouldn't face it alone. In the city with Bade and his family, Adeoti would begin a new chapter. Adeoti had never imagined that his life would take such a drastic turn after the loss of his parents. When his uncle Bade brought him to the city, he had been filled with hope and excitement. The tall buildings, busy streets, and unfamiliar sounds overwhelmed his senses, but with it came the promise of a new beginning, a better life. Bade's home, a grand estate with high gates and lush lawns, seemed like a palace to young Adeoti. The house was filled with every comfort he had never known, and for a brief moment, he believed he had found solace after the painful loss of his family. His cousins, John and Jane, were friendly enough, and their mother, Banke, welcomed him with a strained but polite smile. At first, life seemed full of promise. Bade, a man of few words, assured him that he would be enrolled in school, just like John and Jane. Adeoti held onto this promise tightly, imagining the day he would walk into a classroom, dressed in a fine school uniform, ready to learn and make his parents proud. But the days turned into weeks, and while John and Jane went off to the prestigious private schools, Adeoti remained at home, watching them leave each morning with a sense of envy and longing. Bade's promises, which once echoed so tightly and brightly in his heart, slowly faded into silence. His situation began to shift. Banke, who had initially been cold but tolerable, started treating him differently. Her disdain for him became more pronounced. While John and Jane played after school, Adeoti was given chores, cleaning the entire house, doing the laundry, scrubbing the floors, tasks that kept him busy from dawn to dusk. Banke made sure he was always working, rarely allowing him to rest or play with his cousins. The reality of his situation dawned on him one fateful night when he overheard an argument between Bade and Banke. Lying awake in a small bed, the raised voices seeped through the walls. "I will not have that village boy attend school with my children," Banke spat, a voice filled with venom. "He belongs in a public school, if anywhere at all." Bade's voice was firm, but worn out from the constant bickering. I promised my brother I would take care of him. He deserves a chance just like John and Jane." Banke scoffed. "Your brother is dead. We don't owe him anything. He will go to a public school, and that is final." Tears welled up in Adeoti's eyes as he curled deeper into his thin blanket. His dreams of a good education shattered like a fragile glass. The next day, without much explanation, Bade took Adeoti to a run-down public school far from the prestigious institution where his cousins studied. The building was old and crumbling, the classrooms overcrowded and underfunded. Adeoti had to adjust to this new reality. clinging to the thought that at last he was still learning. But deep down, the sting of betrayal ached in his heart. Back at home, things only grew worse. Banker's cruelty knew no bounds. She denied him food on many days and several occasions, forcing him to go hungry until late in the evening. He was banished from the children's room and made to sleep on a worn-out couch in the cold living room. Each day became a trial of endurance. John and Jane, who had once treated him like a cousin, now barely acknowledged his existence. John, in particular, took to mocking him, enjoying how Banker controlled Adeoti's life like a puppet on strings. The final blow came when Bade announced that they could no longer afford Adeoti's school fees. Without warning, Adeoti was pulled out of the school and sent to a mechanic's workshop to learn a trade. It felt like a death sentencing for the dreams he once nurtured. His childhood hopes of becoming educated and rising above his circumstances now seemed like a distant memory. But he had no choice. He had to endure. At the workshop, life was hard, but Adeoti adapted quickly. The work was dirty and exhausting, but he put all his effort into learning, determined to find some semblance of meaning in his chartered life. His fellow apprentices were rough around the edges, often teasing him for his background, but Adeoti found solace in the machines he worked on. Each repair, each task gave him a small sense of accomplishment. Yet, there was always a gnawing question at the back of his mind. Was this to be his fate? Would he spend the rest of his life confined to the greasy mechanic shop while his cousins lived the life he had once dreamed of? As the years passed, Adeoti's hope dimmed. 4 long years at the mechanic workshop had changed him. The small boy filled with hope and excitement had been replaced by a quiet, hardworking teenager, resigned to his fate. He watched as John and Jane grew up, went on to higher levels of education, and enjoyed all the privileges that were denied to him. Then one day, something shifted. Bade and Banker began whispering behind closed doors. Their plans seemed to exclude Adeoti even more than before, leaving him to wonder what they had in store for him next. His suspicions grew as he noticed Banker speaking in hushed tones with a neighbor, her eyes darting towards him every now and then. There was something dark and sinister brewing, something that would shake his life once again. As he sat alone one evening in the dimly lit mechanic workshop, Adeoti couldn't help but wonder if this was how his life would end up. Would he always be the boy betrayed by his family, abandoned to the fringes of society, while his cousins basked in a brighter future? Or was fate waiting to take a turn? And if so, how could that happen, with Bade and Banker now united in their quest to ruin his life? Is Adeoti's fate about to be confined to just serving at a mechanic workshop, while his cousins hope for a brighter future lies in quality education? Will it continue this way, or were things destined to take a new turn? And if they were, how would that happen, with Bade and Banker now united in his innocent life? Adeoti's life had always been a series of trials, but none had prepared him for what was about to unfold. Ever since his early days, he had grown accustomed to hard labor and quiet sacrifice. By the time he was 17, he had let go of the boyhood dreams of attending school with John and Jane, his cousins. He was now fully focused instead on his apprenticeship at the mechanic workshop. The sound of metal tools clanking and the smell of engine oil had become part of his daily existence. One hot afternoon, Adeoti was at the workshop, bent over an old van, repairing its brake pads. As usual, he tried to focus on the task at hand, but something caught his attention. Two older apprentices stood nearby, exchanging whispers and nervous laughter. They were talking about a monstrous king cobra that had been terrorizing the city for weeks. They described the snake as huge, as thick as a man's leg, with glowing red eyes that seemed to hold supernatural powers. The rumors tugged at Adeoti's curiosity, reminding him of his village days when similar stories circulated. The king cobra was more than just an animal. It was said to be a guardian spirit of the forest, protecting the hidden treasures buried deep within the forbidden woods. But Adeoti shook off these thoughts, reminding himself that he had more important things to focus on. As the sun began to set, Adeoti finished his work for the day and prepared to head home. Just as he was about to leave the workshop, he noticed a tall, thin man standing in the shadows near the entrance. The man wore a long, flowing white agbada, and there was something mysterious, almost otherworldly about him. "Are you Adeoti?" the stranger asked in a calm yet commanding voice. Adeoti hesitated, unsure if he should respond, but the stranger's gaze seemed to hold an irresistible pull. "Yes, I'm Adeoti," Adeoti replied cautiously. The man reached into his agbada and produced a small, intricately carved staff. The dark wood of the staff was smooth and polished, with carvings of snakes slithering along its length. Handing it to Adeoti, the stranger spoke cryptically. "You will need this soon." Adeoti stared at the staff in confusion. What for?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "You will know when the time comes," the man replied before disappearing into the fading light. Confused and unsettled, Adeoti tucked the staff under his bed when he got home, unsure of its purpose. Days passed, but this eerie encounter stayed with him. Meanwhile, the city was abuzz with fear. The giant king cobra had been sighted again, this time attacking livestock and causing widespread panic. Rumors of its supernatural powers grew, with some even saying it was a curse sent to punish the city. One night, a loud commotion outside jolted Adeoti from his sleep. He rushed to the window and saw his cousin, Jane, standing frozen in the courtyard, her face pale with terror. Just a few feet away from her was the enormous king cobra, its muscular body coiled menacingly, its fiery eyes fixed on Jane. Without thinking, Adeoti grabbed the staff the mysterious stranger had given him and raced outside. The cobra turned its gaze towards Adeoti, its tongue flickering the air as it swayed back and forth, poised to strike. Jane stood paralyzed with fear, unable to move or scream. Adeoti stepped between her and the serpent, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea how to use the staff, but he held it out towards the snake, hoping it would somehow protect them. As soon as the cobra's eyes locked onto the staff, it hesitated. Adeoti's hands shook, but the staff seemed to pulse with a strange energy, glowing faintly. The carvings of the snake along its surface appeared to come alive, writhing as if infused with some ancient power. The cobra let out a low hiss, but instead of attacking, it recoiled as though it recognized something in the staff that it feared so much. Summoning all his courage, Adeoti slammed the staff into the ground. A ripple of energy surged through the earth, and the snake jerked backward in pain before slithering away into the darkness. Jane collapsed into Adeoti's arms, trembling and sobbing. "You saved me! You saved me! You saved me!" She whispered, her voice barely audible. Adeoti held her close, still trying to process what had just happened. The story of how Adeoti had saved Jane from the cobra spread quickly. Within hours, the entire city knew about the boy who had tamed the deadly snake. Videos of the encounter surfaced online, and soon Adeoti found himself trending on social media. People marveled at his bravery, while others speculated that he had been chosen by the gods to protect the city. However, that wasn't the end of Adeoti's encounters with the cobra. A few weeks later, while working at the mechanic workshop, the snake returned, this time appearing in the workshop itself. A crowd gathered outside as the massive serpent slithered across the floor, sending apprentices and customers scrambling for safety. But Adeoti didn't run. He grabbed the staff and confronted the snake once more. The cobra seemed to recognize him in the staff. Its eyes glowed, but it didn't attack. It remained still, as if waiting. Adeoti raised the staff, and the same strange energy rippled through the air. This time, the snake didn't flee. It simply lowered its head, tamed by the power of the staff, before slithering back into the shadows. The incident solidified Adeoti's reputation as the snake tamer. And so, media outlets began flocking to the workshop, eager to interview Adeoti. But while the fame was exciting, Adeoti remained humble. He continued his work at the mechanic workshop, his focus still on earning a living for his family. During the weeks following Adeoti's encounters with the cobra, word spread that the staff might possess healing powers. This rumor reached a neighboring town where a young boy named Abu had been bedridden for months, suffering from a mysterious illness that no doctor could cure. Abu's family, desperate for a solution, traveled to the city, hoping that Adeoti's staff could perform a miracle. Though unsure if he could help, Adeoti agreed to visit the boy. When he arrived, he was struck by the sight of Abu, frail, pale, and barely able to move. Adeoti knelt beside the boy's bed and placed the staff in his hands, praying silently. The room filled with a soft glow, and as Adeoti held the staff, a warm surge of energy flowed through it. Slowly, Abu's eyes fluttered open, and color returned to his cheeks. Within hours, he was sitting up, smiling and speaking to his family. News of Abu's miraculous recovery spread like wildfire, further cementing Adeoti's reputation as someone touched by an otherworldly force. As Adeoti's fame grew, so did their attention from outside the city. A foreign company specializing in ethnobiology, a field that studies the relationship between humans and nature, took a keen interest in Adeoti's unique abilities. They had seen the videos of his encounter with the cobra and believed he had a special connection with animals that could benefit their research. The company reached out to Adeoti, offering him a full scholarship to study abroad. They wanted to help him develop his gift even further, studying ancient practices of human-animal connection and the spiritual significance of creatures like the king cobra. Despite his humble beginning and his fear of leaving home, Adeoti knew this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. After much thought and prayer, he accepted the offer. His family, Buddy, Banke, Jane and John, and the entire city gathered to see him off, proud of the boy who had risen from a poor mechanic apprentice to a globally recognized figure. As Adeoti boarded the airplane to start his new journey, he carried with him the staff that had changed his life, a symbol of courage, mystery, and the power that had propelled him to where he now stood. And thus, Adeoti, the boy who once dreamed of schooling with his cousins, John and Jane, was now embarking on a journey far beyond anything he could have imagined. A journey that would take him across continents into a future filled with endless possibilities. Dear viewers, this concludes Adeoti's tale, a story of bravery, mystery, and the rise of an ordinary boy who was destined for greatness. Thank you, dear viewers, for joining us on this remarkable journey through the story of young Adeoti. This marks the conclusion of the Agony of an 8-year-old series. We hope you've been moved by his trials and triumphs as much as we have. But this is just the beginning. We've got more exciting tales and emotional stories lined up for you. So stay tuned up for next series. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which episode touched you the most? What lessons have you drawn from Adeoti's journey? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. And as always, remember to be an integral part of this great community by subscribing to the channel, liking our videos, and sharing them with your friends and family. Your support means the world to us. Your support means the world to us, and we look forward to bringing you more captivating stories soon. Stay tuned and see you in the next series. Bye for now.